The night was thick with storm clouds, and the rain that battered the city's windows felt colder than usual. In the heart of downtown, the glass tower of St. Mercy Hospital shimmered with light, a beacon for desperate souls. But inside, on the pediatric floor, desperation had a different name. Richard Dunham, the man everyone called the King of Concrete, stood as if rooted to the floor. The bravado and charisma that had built his real estate empire were gone. His hands, used to gripping million-dollar contracts, now trembled as he hovered over the hospital crib. In it lay his only son, Leo, only 6 months old, fighting for his life. Leo's skin was pale, lips tinged blue, the heart monitor by his side painting a digital rhythm of fear. Richard's wife, Claudia, had fainted earlier. Now slumped in a chair nearby, she could only whisper prayers that sounded more like apologies to a God she hadn't spoken to in years. "I should have been there. I should have noticed." All around them, doctors barked orders, nurses hustled, and every minute seemed to stretch out forever. Leo had gone from healthy to critical in less than an hour. One moment he was giggling in his mother's arms at the penthouse. The next he was gasping for air, tiny hands clawing the air as if begging for help. Dr. Chen, the leading pediatrician, shook her head as she checked the IV. "His reaction isn't responding. We've tried everything. He's allergic to something, but—" "Just save my son," Richard roared, slamming his fist against the wall. "I don't care what it takes. Do something." But sometimes money can't buy a miracle. Every treatment failed. The allergy was so severe and rare that none of the standard protocols made a difference. Down the hall, unnoticed by anyone, a boy sat cross-legged on the linoleum, his shirt smeared with dirt, shoes torn at the seams. Jalen Carter was only 10 years old, but his eyes were sharp, and his mind never rested. Tonight, he wasn't supposed to be here at all. His grandma had been admitted for chest pains. He'd followed the ambulance, ignored by security, and now waited quietly by the vending machines, where he could still see the commotion by the baby's room. Jalen watched everything. The way nurses darted from cart to cart, the panicked whispers, the doctors, grown-ups, rich people, all looking at each other for answers no one had. He remembered his little sister's allergic reaction 2 years ago, the terror on his mother's face as her lips swelled, the frantic ride in a neighbor's pickup, the EpiPen that saved her when doctors hesitated. Since then, Jalen read everything he could find about allergies, medicine, emergencies, anything that made him feel less powerless. Now, something about the baby's struggle triggered memories. "That's not just asthma," he muttered. He crept closer, invisible in his smallness. Inside the room, a nurse gasped, "Doctor, his oxygen's crashing." "Get the crash cart," Dr. Chen barked. Jalen edged closer, pressing himself against the doorframe. He heard a doctor say, "The new medication isn't working. He's getting worse." Another nurse whispered, "He's allergic to something." But what? Jalen peeked in, heart pounding. He saw the rash on Leo's arms, the way his body stiffened after each IV push. It was just like his sister. Suddenly, he spotted the medication label, ceftriaxone, the same antibiotic that nearly killed his sister. A flash of fear shot through him. He wanted to yell, to scream, but the words stuck in his throat. He was just a dirty kid in a place where people wore suits and lab coats. Who would believe him? But when the baby's monitor flatlined for a split second, Jalen couldn't take it anymore. He burst into the room, voice high and shaking. "Stop! Stop! Don't give him that! He's allergic! You're making it worse!" Time froze. Richard spun around, face flushed with anger and shock. "Who let this kid in? Security!" But Dr. Chen glanced at Jalen, then at the baby. She remembered the allergy note in the chart, something about cross-reactivity, family history, but she'd been too busy to check the details. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. Jalen forced himself to stand tall, even as his knees wobbled. "The medicine. They gave that to my sister. She almost died. It causes a bad reaction in some kids, especially if they have a family allergy. He needs adrenaline and a different IV, not more antibiotics." For a heartbeat, the room was silent except for the beeping monitors. Dr. Chen's eyes narrowed. She turned to the chart, scanned the allergy history, then called out, "Hold everything. Check for cross-reactivity. This boy might be right." A second doctor grabbed the chart, scanning desperately. He's right. There's a family history note. Dr. Chen barked orders, and within seconds, the team switched medications, started an epinephrine injection, and changed the IV fluids. Richard watched, breath held, as his son's color began to return. The blue faded. Leo let out a weak cry, the sweetest sound Claudia had ever heard. Dr. Chen exhaled. He's stabilizing. He's going to make it. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Richard stumbled over to Jalen. His voice, for once, was small. How did you know? Jalen looked down, suddenly shy. I just saw it happen before. Richard knelt, grabbing the boy's shoulders. You saved my son. You saved my family. But security had finally arrived. Sir, is there a problem? Richard waved them off. Number this boy is a hero. Jalen stood, dazed, as Nurse Dr. Chen patted his shoulder. Richard took Jalen's hand in his own, the difference in size symbolic of all the other differences between them. Wealth, power, privilege. But in that room, none of it mattered. All that mattered was that one invisible boy had been brave enough to speak up, and a family was whole because of it. The emergency was over, but the aftermath lingered like a strange, quiet mist in the hospital's corridors. The buzz of doctors faded. Leo, the millionaire's son, was moved to a private room. Stable, but closely monitored. Richard and Claudia sat by the crib, faces streaked with tears, hands joined tightly as if afraid that letting go would somehow reverse the fragile miracle they'd just witnessed, but not everyone returned to comfort. Out in the waiting area, Jalen Carter shifted on the cracked vinyl bench, watching through the glass as the nurses smiled at Leo's parents, as hospital staff patted each other on the back, already retelling the story as if they'd known what to do all along. Only Dr. Chen, silent and shaken, made her way out into the hall to look for Jalen. She found him hunched over a pack of peanut butter crackers, his dinner, scavenged from the vending machine. Jalen, she said softly, lowering herself to his level. I want to say thank you. You were brave. You didn't just save Leo. You reminded us all why we do this. Jalen shrugged, picking at a hole in his jeans. Most people wouldn't have listened. They just see a kid. She smiled. Tonight you weren't just a kid. You were the smartest one in the room. He didn't know how to reply. Compliments made him itch. Is my grandma okay? Dr. Chen nodded. She's resting. You can see her in the morning. Jalen's eyes darted to the floor. He was used to being invisible, to people stepping over him or past him. His mom worked nights, his grandma did her best, but he'd learned to make himself small, to expect little. Tonight he felt taller somehow. Meanwhile, on the pediatric floor, Richard Dunham couldn't stop staring at his son. Every breath Leo took felt like a gift. Guilt gnawed at him. How had a stranger, a child, saved his boy when a team of top doctors had failed? He turned to Claudia. Did you see him? The boy. He just knew. Claudia wiped her eyes. He didn't hesitate. He could have been ignored, but he spoke up. He saved our family. Richard's face grew determined. I want to thank him properly. Not just a thank you, something real. As the night wore on, word of the miracle boy traveled. A nurse snapped a picture of Jalen and Leo together, intending to send it to hospital PR. But Jalen, embarrassed, asked them not to share it. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to go home with his grandma. But fate had other plans. A little after midnight, Richard approached the nurse's station. Where's the boy who saved my son? A nurse nodded toward the waiting area. He's sleeping there, sir. His grandma's in recovery. Richard walked over, found Jalen curled up, head on his backpack, the too big shirt serving as a blanket. For a moment, Richard hesitated. He'd spent his life learning who to trust, how to spot the angles, the fakes. But in this dirty, exhausted boy, he saw more courage than in most men he'd ever hired. He sat down quietly beside Jalen. Hey, wake up. Jalen blinked, then stiffened when he realized who was sitting beside him. I didn't do anything special, Jalen whispered, already bracing for rejection. I just remembered what happened to my sister. Richard shook his head. You did something nobody else could. You saw what we missed, and you spoke up, even though it must have been hard. Jalen looked away, cheeks burning. People don't usually listen to kids like me. Richard's voice softened. They should. A silence grew between them, thick with all the things left unsaid. Finally, Richard spoke. I want to help you, Jalen. You deserve more than just a thank you. Tell me, what do you need? What do you dream of? Jalen hesitated. No one had ever asked him that before. The idea of dreaming felt dangerous, like stepping onto thin ice. I just want my grandma to be okay. I want to learn more. Maybe become a doctor one day so I can help kids like my sister, like Leo. Richard smiled, an idea forming. Let's make that happen. Not tomorrow, not someday. Tonight. Jalen frowned, unsure if he was being teased. But Richard stood, pulled out his phone, and made a call. James, get my driver here. No, not for me. For a young man and his grandmother. I want them safe. And send someone to get the best tutors in the city. I want everything arranged before morning. Oh, and James, get a scholarship fund set up. Use my name if you have to, but make sure it's in Jalen's. Jalen's eyes widened. Why are you doing this? Richard looked at him with a seriousness that made the boy feel the weight of his words. Because you saw my son as a person, not just a problem to solve. Because you were braver than all the adults in that room. And because the world needs more people like you, Jalen. People who care and who act. In the early hours, as nurses quietly tended to Leo and hospital lights dimmed, Jalen and his grandma were whisked away in a limousine for the first time in their lives. His grandma, still groggy, barely believed it. What did you do, Jalen? He smiled shyly. I just tried to help. As they rode through the silent city, Jalen's heart raced with hope for the first time in a long while. He didn't know what the future would bring. He only knew that for once he'd been seen. And nothing in the world felt more powerful than that. The next morning, as dawn spilled honey-colored light over the city, Jalen awoke in a place he'd never seen before. A spacious, sunlit guest room in a penthouse apartment overlooking the skyline. For a second, he thought he was dreaming. The sheets were soft. The air smelled like fresh flowers and breakfast. His grandma slept peacefully in a proper bed beside him. He heard voices outside, hushed but urgent. He tiptoed to the door and peered through the gap. Claudia Dunham stood with a woman in a crisp suit, quietly discussing arrangements. No media, Claudia insisted. This isn't for show. Jalen's mind spun. Just last night, he was invisible, a shadow in a noisy world. Now people spoke in whispers around him, as if his very presence deserved protection. Soon Richard himself entered, still wearing yesterday's suit, but his face softer, less guarded. He knelt by Jalen's bed. How are you feeling? Jalen, still shy, nodded. Is Leo? Richard smiled. Leo's awake. He's asking for you. Without another word, Jalen was whisked back to the hospital in the Dunham's private car. The halls that had once felt overwhelming now buzzed with quiet respect. Nurses and doctors smiled at him, and some even whispered his name as he passed. In the private room, Leo's little hand gripped Jalen's finger with surprising strength. Claudia blinked away tears and Richard pulled up a chair. Last night, he said, you gave us back our son. There's nothing in this world that can repay that debt, but we'd like to try. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is for you and your grandma. It's enough to pay for a better apartment, for food, for anything you need. He pressed a second envelope into Jalen's hand. And this is a full scholarship, all the way through college, at any school you choose. Medical, engineering, anything. No strings attached. Jalen stared, too stunned to speak, but Richard wasn't finished. We want you to be part of our family too. Not out of pity, because we believe in you. You'll have tutors, mentors, and every opportunity. And when you're ready, if you want, you can shadow doctors at my company's foundation hospital. We'll help you learn, starting now. Jalen's grandma woke in the middle of this, bewildered by the commotion, and for a moment, suspicion clouded her eyes. She'd known too many broken promises, too many strings attached to gifts from people with money. But as Claudia gently explained, tears running down her face, she felt the truth in their words. Jalen squeezed his grandma's hand. We can trust them, Nana. I think our luck just changed. That afternoon, word began to spread, not just in the hospital, but online. The nurses couldn't resist sharing the story without Jalen's last name, and soon headlines appeared. Underage boy saves millionaire's son when doctors fail. Social media exploded with hope and admiration. For a rare moment, the world was united in awe. Not at the money, not at the status, but at the courage of a boy who refused to be silent when every second mattered. But the most powerful moment came late that night. The Dunham penthouse was quiet. Jalen, in new clothes, sat at a marble counter with his grandma, finishing the best meal of his life. Richard joined them, holding out 2 envelopes. "There's one more thing," he said softly. "My company does a lot of work in the community. We need people with heart and vision to help us reach those who are overlooked. Would you consider becoming an ambassador for our foundation, Jalen? Sharing your story, inspiring other kids, helping us make sure no one is ever invisible again?" Jalen's breath caught. The idea terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. I, I'll try. I want to help." Richard nodded, pride shimmering in his eyes. "Sometimes all the world needs is for one person to speak up. Last night, that was you. Tonight, it can be you again." As the city lights blinked in the distance, Jalen's life changed forever. Not because of money, but because someone finally believed in him. And as he drifted off to sleep in a real bed, with his grandmother safe and hope burning in his chest, he knew one thing. He would spend the rest of his life making sure that every voice, no matter how small, could be heard.